We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, LEAHA Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host LEAHA Mattinson, and I want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone throughout this wonderful globe who's tuning in to listen to the show, Master Your Life or Recovery Road. We've been on now for almost 7 years, and I want to say thank you to the 300,000 plus download listeners that are sharing and spreading this good information throughout the land. So again, take a moment to give yourselves a pat on the back for all of your liking and sharing and subscribing and checking out the website and checking out the YouTube channel, because without you, we would have no appeal at all. So thank you, everybody. For those of you who are just listening to this as a podcast, I want to invite you to come on over to the website so you can tune into the video version of this episode. So today we're going to be talking with Dr. David Hardy. Dr. Hardy graduated cum laude in his chiropractic classes and has received his diploma in functional neurology through the American Chiropractic Neurology Board. He's practiced in North Carolina and Ohio before returning home to Alberta, Canada. During his time in the US, his primary focus was seeing patients struggling with concussions and brain injuries, neurodegenerative, neurodevelopmental, and metabolic conditions. Before healthcare, Dr. Hardy's career was in education, where he taught toddlers to senior citizens in Australia, Japan, and Canada. Dr. Hardy also has an impressive athletic experience, including competing at high levels of rugby and competing both full and half Ironman competitions, which is tough stuff, I can tell you. He currently enjoys hiking, mountain biking, and pretty much any outdoor activity. So welcome, Dr. Hardy, to today's show.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being here, LEAHA.
It's great to have you. I was excited to have you on because you have got this wonderful method that I was tuned into probably about 6 years ago in one of our first episodes on this podcast. And so your method is called the Hardy Brain. So it's very funny. Dr. David Hardy, the Hardy Brain, for those of you who haven't caught up yet, because it might be early wherever you're tuning in from. So Dr. Dave, so tell us, how did you get into the career that you're in, and what is it you're focusing in on, or that you're noticing people struggling with that caused you to develop this program?
Right. Well, geez, just like you were reading off, it's been a journey. I started out in education and taught in Australia, Japan, and then here in Canada as well. And I was teaching behavioral students in Red Deer in Alberta. And I absolutely loved it. Like these kids are very needy and they need a lot of attention and care. But it was high stress and I saw a shelf life to it. And a couple of my friends were chiropractors and were also former teachers, and I got talking to them more and more. And next thing I know, I was signing up for sending my check off to Life University and just outside Atlanta, Georgia. And I was a big rugby player at the time too. And I thought I could probably get part of my education paid for by playing rugby with the university down there. And before I even went this summer season, before I went in the fall down to Atlanta, I had torn my pec minor pretty much off and struggled through a season down there. And then realized I wasn't going to be playing and hung up the boots. And for my athletic career, that was like one of the biggest kind of hits I ever took. And it was just debilitating for me kind of mentally to be thrown out of a game because of an injury, basically. But it turned out to be the best thing ever for me, because then I found these postdoctorate courses in functional neurology. And I was I was taking these diplomate courses on the weekends with docs who were out in the field, and then going to regular chiropractic university during the weeks. But it basically tied all that information together for me and put it into a system that made sense, and just gave me that extra edge of knowledge that really is just needed, because everybody in the alternative field or in exercise knows that you're stimulating the brain every time you move and that you do something. Your modalities are going to fire a receptor that goes someplace in the brain. But the key there is now to match it up with the actual clinical science, neuroscience of how the brain works and functions, so that your therapies can have more of an impact. So you're targeting them to the weak parts of the brain versus just going off a protocol that has gotten so many people better and have been passed down kind of like recipes. So that became extremely exciting for me, because I was lucky to be mentored by some of the best doctors in the field. And the top doctor, Dr. Carrick, was treating Sidney Crosby and all these other star athletes with serious, severe concussions that have taken them not only out of their sport, but out of life. Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing to see these athletes get back into their game and get back into living properly. And then, of course, there was all sorts of other neurologic conditions and that were absolutely amazing to see people get better. And that just led me down this road and path to learn more and more in this field. And then from there, I practiced in North Carolina for a little while there at a functional neurology office, and was seeing a lot of concussion, brain injuries, some cognitive decline, and then referrals from counselors in the post-addiction area. Mm-hmm. So we were working on basically the physical ways that we could rewire the brain to hopefully help their counseling out with the post-addiction, and we're seeing great results with that. And then I worked in a functional medicine office in Ohio, and that kind of really fortified the metabolic side of things. So we were looking at labs and going through nutrition, supplementation, and working with a lot of diabetes, autoimmune conditions. There was some MS patients that came through, so I was able to tie the metabolic and the stimulation models together, and it just took off, and was absolutely amazing, the results we were getting. And now I'm back in Canada, and clinically the scope of practices are different, and obviously the models are different. But I've also seen a huge need now in people who are struggling within their career and life that aren't in a clinical setting. So of course, with COVID and everything that's gone around, there's a lot of stress and all sorts of things that are impacting people's lives and decreasing their enjoyment and their function. And also being on this journey myself, and of course, being in the entrepreneurial field, bouncing from office to office now, I've felt the stress myself, and moving cross continent several times has not been a fun journey, and that has taken a toll. I know myself as a high performer, technically, that you start to feel yourself really decline in these stressful situations. And it's not all about mindset, because there's so much physical damage done when you're in these events. And I just see a huge need to get that knowledge out there that people can do from the comfort of their own home, if they're in these battles with their business life or their leadership life. And that's why I'm starting the Hardy Brain, is to really help people out that need it at these high performing areas in life.
Right. I love it. I love it. And you're one of the few people throughout the span of time of this podcast that has really resonated 100% in alignment with really what I think about the body's ability to heal.
Right.
And that what I love is that you've got the evidence to back it up. So for many years now, you've got the clinical evidence of working with high level athletes. You yourself were a high level athlete. And it wasn't that long ago where scientists were saying the brain is hardwired, like once something's happened, you can't fix anything. But really what you're saying is this completely different thing, which is you can fix things, you can fix really serious things. And it isn't just high level athletes that have all of these traumas. The traumas and the stressors of the high performer or even just average Joe citizen now really do show up the same way on the brain.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it doesn't matter what the face is looking back at you in the mirror or who you're looking across the table from. Almost everybody has got some sort of thing going on that has caused them some brain damage, to just put it quite frankly, and it has changed your ability to perform at your peak. Not meaning that you're a high level athlete, but just meaning that you have peak performance, that you've got good cognition and the calm manner, emotional control. So talk about that, Dr. Dave. Like what are the things clinically that you've seen over the span of your life? Because when you say you got amazing results or people got amazing results, what kind of things changed in their life when they worked with you?
Oh, geez, there's a lot of stories there. In the clinical setting, when I was first kind of starting out in this field, there was this 39-year-old mother who came through our clinic, and she had a post-stroke sort of presentation. So basically, the paralysis almost on one side of her face, the spastic posturing, and she came in a walker. So she's using a walker and she's moving extremely slowly. And you would have think she's like an 80-plus-year-old lady, the way she was moving. And of course, just once again, not able to function in her daily life, and to not be able to work and to raise her teenage daughter was a challenge and chore for her. They were almost looking after her now. And we worked with her for maybe a year on and off with these intensive programs where we see people multiple times per day for 1 or 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And the reason we do that is because that's the way the brain learns and recovers, is repetition, and then home exercises in between. And we went from being on a walker and not being able to move properly, basically shuffling one leg, dragging it behind herself, to getting her on a 4-prong cane to a regular cane, and then eventually walking across her daughter's graduation stage with her. So it was just one of those stories that really melted the heart. That's for sure.
Yes.
And it's just been kind of one amazing success story after another with these conditions. I remember one of the post-addiction clients coming through, and basically he was always kind of in this frustration, angry mode. And one day he comes in nice and calm, and we heard from the counselor later that she felt she was stuck in the level of therapy that she was providing him. And then he kind of had breakthroughs after breakthroughs with the counseling sessions because he was able to process and think clearer. And it just seemed to enrich his life. And I see through social media that he's doing well. He's holding down a really good jobs, progressing up the ladder, and hasn't relapsed at all. And
Oh, I love that story. I love that story. Just it brings to mind a friend that I had like years ago in the RCMP. That's in Canada, the police force here. And he was as a young officer, he'd had lots of head injuries, been in lots of fights, played hockey as a young guy. And when I met him, he was having like 60 rages a day, 60, and often in his vehicle with his daughter who was in grade 1 at that time. And he would just lose it. So when I met him, he's like telling me this one. So I was asking him for his history and I said, well, like, do you ever think you were brain damaged? And he's like, well, that's a nice way to meet somebody. The first time. And I was, right, but it was even at that, it's like having the understanding though, that the brain is the seat of all of your decision making, of all of the things. And so it's not just this willpower thing, because up until then, he had been trying through the willpower method to get himself to not have these rages. And it was just an epic fail. So then it piles on, feeling worse and worse about your inability to actually have that emotional control. So this is a very nuanced thing for people, for people to understand, is that if you've got brain damage of any kind, and it doesn't have to just be a fall.
Exactly.
It changes everything. So it can change things very significantly. Maybe just speak into that.
Well, definitely. There's still that stigma around brain health that damage means that, you've had parts of your brain absolutely destroyed, and say from a stroke or from a head knock, and that tissue's gone. And that's the only way you can have brain damage. And well, we know now that so many other things can cause the brain not to function and fire properly. So it can be metabolic disorders, it could be viral pathogens, it could be stress, chronic stress constantly, blood sugar dysregulations. That can eventually lead to Alzheimer's, which is being nicknamed type 3 diabetes. You can have obviously concussion, head knocks. There can also be neurodevelopmental issues where just parts of the brain didn't get as strong as other parts of the brain. And of course, that's the whole kind of spectrum disorder. And of course, that goes past just a diagnosed condition. And looking at basically now function. How do we get to be one of those all-stars in daily life, whether it's business or career, where people just look like they're able to do their tasks effortlessly? And how can that person get so much done in one day, and I'm struggling just to make it through lunch? And all of that is brain function. And there's so much potential that we're missing out and not tapping into in our daily lives, because we're not concentrating on the physical things that actually get the brain stronger. And so much of it is, once again, basically all this sensory information coming into the brain that then forms emotions and then forms ideas, thoughts, and everything else. If your brain is so concentrated on trying to keep you balanced on 2 feet without falling over, you're never going to be able to have those amazing discussions and conversations with other people where you're thinking and those thoughts are flowing, because the brain's not concentrating on that. It's forced to concentrate on things that should be subconscious and that you shouldn't even be thinking about. But all the resources now are going to these other areas of the brain. And those other areas of the brain are actually way more dense in the number of neurons than our tiny little cognitive centers that form the thoughts. And if you get kind of the hardware upgraded, then when you go to learn something new, the software works better.
Yeah, and this is key. So not just for people who are, the everyday managers or entrepreneurs or innovators, but for regular people who are managing a household, and especially over this last couple of years. But us really dive into kind of some of the specific problems that happen for people who do own businesses or are managing people. And that can include your role as a dad or a mom, like, because you're managing little bodies. And if you're managing a business, you're managing maybe bigger bodies, unless your business is a daycare, in which case maybe it's both, or a school, maybe you're managing lots of things. But if you're managing people or you're an entrepreneur, and maybe even if you're introverted, what would be some of the things that would be special considerations or problems that might come up?
Right. So much of it, and this is why it's a lot more stressful in some of these other careers in the private sector. Mm-hmm. I've been both in public and private sectors, and it's going to be different stresses. But basically in jobs and careers where the path is already formed, there's more certainty. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're, once again, going out and trying to create something for yourself, you have to kind of find the path and our paths. And there's so many things that will distract you and take you away from basically that vision that you have. And that uncertainty of how to actually build things and how to make something out of basically, well, from scratch is a very stressful situation to be put in. And of course, the stats are horrendous with entrepreneurship on mental health and the what happens to people. And there's always going to be a point in any business where the income's not coming in and the stress is piling up more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is happening now in the private public sector as well. I just saw one article, Edmonton Journal, where they were stating something like 50% of all households now are at risk of defaulting on their debt.
Yes. I think like $200 away from, I heard, I read. Yes.
Yeah. And that pressure is huge, and it just weighs in on people over and over again. But then also when people actually have income and are moving on, it's not like the stresses decrease. You kind of go up a level and now you're in charge of more things and you're juggling more balls in the air that you're hoping that you don't drop. And that just becomes once again something that builds and stress and the chemistry there. If we don't actually move and burn it off, it's basically going to ferment in our body and have all sorts of physiological consequences to it. Mm-hmm. So quite commonly, we're handling the stressful situations wrong by just trying to turn down the dial on the stress. We need to find ways to, once again, use up the stress chemistry that the body's actually producing at that moment in time, so that then we can move on to something. But to let it build up is going to have all sorts of cascades physiologically that are just going to decrease the function throughout not just the brain and nervous system, but the entire body. And just then fatigue starts to set in. And then, well, how well are you going to be able to think, function when that fatigue really starts to hit you? And it just becomes unsustainable to do that much work and not care for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Hardy, do you think that we're also seeing an increase in the number of people who are taking their own lives as a result of not being able to handle the stressors of just everyday life at this time?
Right. I haven't seen the stats and can't quote them, but my initial thought is absolutely you're going to see more of that happen and take place. We see it in every economic downturn anyways. So to that level, it doesn't matter if the numbers increase by only one or two. It's still one or two lives that have been destroyed when something could have been done that would have helped them bounce back from it. And it's really, really a human disaster that we're not taking care of this in this point in time.
Yeah. And I think it's across the board too, that it's both introverted and extroverted, male, female, that are amplified in the stress category. So
absolutely. Yes.
what we're looking for, though, to get through sometimes the stressful times is the ability to draw on our masculine energy in order to get ourselves moving to do something. And when you have been eating nachos or drinking booze or staying up all night because you can't sleep because your latest bill just came and you went, oh my God, I can't pay that $700 energy bill, but I can have a beer. Because I hear that. It's like, I can't pay that, but I can have a beer. But what does that do to us when we...
Right. In any stressful situation, we're going to go to something that makes us feel better. And quite commonly too, males are more predisposed to addictions than women, but they happen in both sexes. Mm-hmm. And it's also different addictions though too. Stress chemistry will, like cortisol is a glucocorticoid. So gluco being glucose, sugar, and corticoid basically means steroid. So it's a sugar steroid. Well, of course, you're going to need increased sugar and fuel when you're in a stressful situation because, the body's producing a lot more energy to try to get you through it. So then you get spikes and dips in your blood sugar levels. And then, of course, you're going to have cravings, and then your insulin resistance is going to change as well. And then inflammation is going to hit us as well. And part of the way we're actually basically trying to soothe ourselves is, like, say, if it's eating or alcohol, both of those very much affect sugar levels and blood glucose. So we're trying to, once again, get that fuel source in, but also the taste and the sensation of it fires into different parts of our brain that make us feel better. And then, of course, while it makes us feel better, then we get more chemicals produced that say, hey, do it again. And even though we know it's wrong, then it becomes, once again, this whole kind of web of things biologically that are driving and reinforcing all these loops and taking us from a bad situation into a worse situation. And then once the system's declined and we're not thinking well, then we go into, well, we need willpower so you can kick yourself out of this. And it's just madness how we're still approaching these issues as a society. And the stressors on top of that are going to build and build because then we think we need to do more of the same because we haven't put enough effort into it to make a change. And well, no, we've done the wrong thing over and over again, and now it's a habit. And we need to look at smarter approaches now.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that. The body doesn't lie. The body tells it all. The body tells it all of what's going on in your brain. When I was in the best shape of my life, when doing brain health stuff, I would have people say to me, wow, it's like you've got your physique is amazing. And I'd say it's because I'm taking care of my brain. I 100% was not focused at all on my body. I was 100% focused on what was going on in my brain. I had a major impetus to do so, to pay attention, but I think we all do. And now it's becoming this more realization of, like, do you really love life? Are you wanting to be here and being able to participate fully? Are you living fully as the, glorious being that you were placed on the planet to be, or is something actually overtaken your brain? Because it was a relief to me to actually have that fundamental understanding that the brain can really betray you. And so it's going, oh, hang on, brain, hang on a minute here. What's going on in there? And then what do I need to do to get it Yeah, perpendicular is like it's a funny statement, but whatever. You know what I mean. Anyone who measures
Absolutely.
stuff, it's like, yeah, how do you get it on an even keel? So, Dr. Hardy, can you talk a little bit about if we've got some time? Do you want to delve into what are some of the components of the Hardy Brain, the program that you're specifically running? Who is it for, and what is it that you're helping people to achieve?
Right. Basically, it's for people at home that don't want to travel into a clinic, that are, once again, people who are taking control of their lives and situations, and that are looking for increased performance. There's basically a clinical pyramid where at the top, people need a clinical setting, absolutely. And then below that, there's, once again, people that kind of want that extra performance and enhancement. And then, of course, there's kind of the base of the pyramid, which is the general population trying to get through life and move. So with all of that being said, not everybody always needs to be in a clinical situation, or in a clinical situation too. Appointment times are so limited. And in a regular healthcare model, it is so difficult to make the right recommendations and explain it thoroughly so that people really grasp the concepts. And especially when it comes to something new, or in this case, new and old. A lot of strategies for brain health have been around for a long time, and now meshing it up with what we know more with the clinical neuroscience and information coming out, it is a huge pile of information to get out to people. So to be able to condense that into a few minutes really doesn't work. And there's kind of this saying that the coaching field is unregulated, but at the same time, the healthcare system in a lot of places can be overregulated. And so where's kind of this happy medium where you can get information that is going to be, once again, top notch information that's coming out, meshed with basically things that people have done for hundreds of years, and tie it into a system that is explainable and understandable, is what we're trying to do with the Hardy Brain program. Mm-hmm. And then when you have this general understanding of how the system works and what's not going right in your own physiology and in your own nervous system, then you can start to be more targeted with the therapies, exercises, and everything you do to build your health. And it really is kind of that self information piece that is being missing in the systems out there. And the first one is how do you identify what's not going right in your own system, besides listing a bunch of symptoms? And just because you have one symptom, it doesn't necessarily match up to one single part of your physiology or your neurology. And we've kind of been taught this mechanistic approach where we look at one symptom, one part of the brain, one lack of a nutrient or one drug that's needed. And it's this multi-connected web that needs to be processed if you want something sustainable. If you want to keep returning into adding one more thing on top of another thing when that causes another symptom to happen, then you're going to be stuck in this maze for forever. And it's going to be absolutely maddening. But if we can start to actually look at how things are interconnected and get as close to an understanding as possible, then the likelihood that we can do the right things that are going to help our bodies and our brains out is going to increase exponentially, in my opinion, and from what I've seen and what I've experienced in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it. It's the ultimate kind of self-care, holistic self-care product.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Which is what people are really looking for at this time. People who listen to Master Your Life and Recovery Road are people who want to take their health and wealth into their own hands. And the experience, I think it's like, how do people feel? How do you feel when your brain is functioning better? Because that even is a hard thing for people to grasp. The clinical aspect is one thing, but how do you actually feel? How do you notice when things are different? And so you have a really recent story of yourself just applying your own program to yourself. So prior to Christmas and, now that we're doing this recording in March, just a few months later, how are you feeling? How were you feeling and how are you feeling now?
Yeah, that was something that snuck up on me. Was kind of that typical fall, early winter stage where, there's less sunlight to help stimulate myself and my energy levels. And then, of course, less exercise at that point in time. And a lot of things diet wise started to creep up on me. And of course, that was compounded with stress and everything that you experience when you're running your own practice type situations. And I looked over at myself and realized that my face was just puffy with water retention, which is inflammation, and looked down at my gut, and here's this huge beer belly and 240 pounds, basically, 20, 30 pounds over the weight I usually am. And just feeling like I always needed to take a nap, that anything I did was energy draining, that even if it was nothing, I needed to sleep more. And finally, I'm just like, well, this, I know what to do. Why aren't I doing it? So it was really that kick in my own butt. And I went on a fast first, and I've done fasting before. And it is, as I say, the laziest way to get into better shape. Because you don't do anything. What are you doing? I'm not eating. And I'm taking in water and some electrolytes to keep that. And it's amazing. Even on a fast, you do a few days, then you notice energy levels increase, and you notice the water weight disappear, and quickly. So I've done several different fasts before, and this time I worked up to making it a 10-day fast, and over 10 days. And during that period of time, I think it was 15 pounds that I lost just by doing the fast, and then went into a ketogenic diet, and a clean ketogenic diet. So looking at the proper oils and fats during this. And one of the reasons, especially kind of that midwinter to late winter, early spring time of year, why ketogenic diets are so effective too, is basically, if you look around during that period of time, if you didn't have the supermarkets, what foods would be available? And it would be these fats and proteins more so into the diet. And we've kind of ignored the fact that there are different eating seasons as well. And during summer is when you see more of the fruits and the actual foods being produced by nature that are higher in sugar content. And that kind of matches up more too with the energy supply that we also get from the sun stimulating us. And then of course it's different metabolic processes during those times of seasons. So basically a ketogenic diet is a great winter diet. And the great thing too is it will once again kind of reset your blood sugars and your insulin sensitivity. And it will change the fuel source more from burning sugars and carbohydrates into burning fats. So you're also able to decrease your fat content if you're on a ketogenic diet. And it's not for every single person out there. There are, of course, a lot of genetic factors and lifestyle factors that are going to pool in. But for myself, it's just been, once again, this life-changing kind of thing that I've done. And and look down at my belt, and there's a difference of 4 loops.
That's a lot.
Right there, in a matter of a few months. And then I'm not even concerned about the weight, because working out now more regularly as well, I'm putting on more muscle mass as well. So the weight doesn't matter to me, but looking down and seeing the belt loop change, and more importantly, feeling the energy levels go up, and thinking clearer. And a lot of people in ketosis will mention that they do kind of get this brain high where all of a sudden the brain is using the fuel source that it would most likely want to use anyways. And it just feels amazing. And it's some people would say that that's too aggressive for me. Well, there's other things that can be done too that are going to help start to move the needle for you. And I don't recommend in a lot of people that they start out with something that big, because once again, they're going to find that they hit more hurdles along the way, and instead of clearing them, they're getting tripped over them. So it all becomes more of this individual style plan where, okay, what's going wrong with your physiology? What are your current lifestyle factors that are going to influence it? And then let's come up with a sustainable plan for yourself instead of a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, and the individualization, I can't emphasize how important that is, because depending on, of course, like your age, your stage of life, your physiology, the things you've had as injuries before in your life, if you don't have a good coach, those things can actually hinder you a lot in the progress in any program where you're trying to do a self-improvement to your physical body and to your brain. So it's a very good investment to have a good coach. And it's a very not good investment, the opposite of that, to hire a poor one.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can attest to that. Holy man. Anyway, not to get off in the weeds about it, because I want to stay talking about this. It's so important for people who are leaders or leaders in their families to be able to contemplate and think about how quickly they can make a change in their physiology, and why it's important, because it not only affects your ability to be a better human being, better social interactions, better emotional control, but would you say that it can improve your bottom line as a business owner as well?
Yeah, that's exactly it. In the business world, especially, your performance dictates basically how successful that business is going to be. And if you can't perform well, if you're snappy, irritable, or lethargic and lacking energy, you're not going to be able to perform and continually kind of go through those lessons where it's try something, fail, and then finally try something that works. And that process there of constantly trying to communicate differently with different people, different markets, and the stress of, once again, not being able to succeed all the time or having a set plan by itself decreases performance in a lot of people. And then you add on top of that, once again, a system that doesn't feel good. And that system being how your brain and nervous system are processing information. And so much of a lot of this is connections. And if you can't connect with yourself because yourself isn't firing and working properly, then connecting with others is once again something that isn't going to happen. And if it does, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, and connecting with others, especially for the introverted leaders or introverted entrepreneurs. The extroverts might be out there going, well, at least I can go out to my social network and get things figured out. For people who are more introverted, intellectual, or even just really, really studious, trying to read enormous amounts of information so that they can stay up to date on what's going on to keep their engine going of their business or their life, because there's copious amounts of information to ingest when you are working on any sort of projects. Then what's the outcome for people who are on the introvert side of things if they don't do something?
They bottle it up even more. And usually kind of the pattern I've seen with introverts are again, kind of, they have more of that inner dialogue. So basically things that don't go right are going to be the things that they really overthink on. And it causes a lot more anxiety, frustration, and everything else with introverts, because it's not energy that they release. Whereas extroverts sometimes are able to, once again, kind of talk to somebody and then feel better about that situation and get it off their chest, per se. The other thing too is introverts usually too are more focused on the outside world and less on themselves. So even the things that they're thinking about are usually some external event that has happened. So their nervous system is more, once again, firing and looking at the outside world versus taking care of their own body. Whereas in a lot of extroverts, basically, the reason they talk and they feel so good is because that brings in that bodily sensation as they do it. There's that rhythm of how they talk and move and laugh to different situations. And then too, when they're talking to other people, basically that information from the other person is a comfort, which again fires more into that body sensation and different circuits in the body. So there becomes that aspect to it too, is, okay, well, can we do little tests neurologically wise to kind of see, okay, is your brain more focused on the outside world versus your own internal world? And you look at people who are confident people have different posture that we automatically just recognize, tonality in the voice. So all these movements and posturing is different. And that's basically the brain and nervous system taking care of its own body before it deals with outside stressors and everything else. So quite commonly with introverts, we got to look at, okay, well, how do we increase the body sensations and the processes there in the nervous system to get them to be more comfortable in their own skin?
Wonderful. So we're at a time, Dr. Dave, Dr. Hardy. And so for anyone who's looking for a holistic self-care product, this might just be for you. How can you take your whiny, depressed, maybe not functioning that highly brain and turn it into a Hardy brain? You can check out Dr. David Hardy's work in our show notes, or you can come to the website, or you can go to just Google search Dr. Hardy and you can find his information. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of LEAHA Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.